All rights reserved. We reserve all rights. Houston, you're going to want to stick around for the ending finale of this film because you definitely have a major problem now. But first, one last time for those still not getting it, there is Vernadsky Base right there on the sea level. See the water? There is Rothera Station right there on the sea level. See the water? No altitude difference between them to affect any sunrise or sunset times. It's called sea level because water doesn't magically curve around balls. Like everywhere else on Earth, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west in Antarctica. It's no different for these two bases on the alleged Antarctic Peninsula. The globe model says that is because these two bases are spinning from west to east towards the sun. So the sun would have to rise first at the most easterly base, Vernadsky first, and the most westerly base, Rothera, second that morning. And then later that afternoon, the solar noon, where the sun is closest to each base on the Tropic of Capricorn, would also have to be closest to the most easterly base, Vernadsky first, and then the most westerly base, Rothera second. Pretty simple. The Flat Earth model says both bases are sitting still and the sun is coming towards them around its tropic latitude rotation from the east to the west, but still has to reach the most easterly base, Vernadsky, first in the morning, then the most westerly base, Rothera, second, just the same as the globe model. Equally later that day, it's solar noon, not the preceding light that lights up the morning, but where the actual white-yellow visual ball of light in the sky, we call the sun, also has to reach Vernadsky to the east first, before it reaches Rothera to the west. Just like the sun or morning dawn cannot rise in Los Angeles or Chicago in the morning before it rises in New York City, and Los Angeles and Chicago cannot and do not have their solar noon before New York City. Pretty simple. And since I've never been to either base, you've never been to either base, and Jaron definitely has never been to either base, we have to just blindly take the word of the software I debunked in the last film. So we're all on the same page. Here's how to read a latitude and longitude map. On a globe model, any location north of that blue equator line will start getting higher and higher numbers from 0 to 90 and be called north latitude, like here. Any location south of that blue equator line will start getting higher and higher from 0 to 90, but be called south latitude, like here. Anything east of that red line, called the Greenwich Meridian Line, will go from 0 to higher and will be called east longitude, like here. Anything west of that red line will obviously go from 0 to higher and be called west longitude, like here. On the flat Earth map, anything outside of the red equator circle is south latitude, still going from 0 at the red circle to 90 at the outer edge of the ice wall. Anything inside the red circle is north latitude. Anything on top of the yellow Greenwich Meridian Line is east latitude. Anything on the bottom is west latitude. The Americas are in the west. Asia, Russia, Australia, etc. are in the east. Pretty simple. Again, 30 west, 45 west, 60 west, etc. That means 64 degrees west longitude is still 4 degrees more east than 68 degrees west longitude, which we're told Vernadsky is 64.15 degrees west longitude, which is 4 degrees east of Rothera's 68.07. And the closer you get to the outer ice wall or alleged South Pole, the south latitude numbers go up from 0 to 90. So Vernadsky's 65.14 south latitude is 2 degrees more north of Rothera's 67.33 south latitude. Remember, they're both on sea level. Remember, the sun always rises and travels from east to west on both models, so no different than New York City to Chicago or Los Angeles. The sun must rise first at Vernadsky in the morning before Rothera to its west, and solar noon must also appear first at Vernadsky before Rothera. And yet, as I pointed out in the film, every single day the impossible is being claimed, that the sun rises in the west in Rothera, marked yellow first, from 55 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes before Vernadsky in the east, marked purple, but then somehow magically turns around, doubles back, and gets closest to Vernadsky at solar noon, 16 minutes before Rothera, just as it should. If you believe the sun can rise in Los Angeles or Chicago in the west before New York City in the east, I'm sure some scammers have a luxury condo to sell you in the Florida Everglades. And it's not some trivial one-off clerical error. It is consistently claimed happening all year, including the month of November, when they claim Rothera suddenly starts getting 24-hour sun periods on the 28th, while Vernadsky doesn't. Hit pause and see for yourself. And also in January, when they claim Rothera finally doesn't get a 24-hour sun. Remember, Vernadsky never claims a 24-hour sun period. Even when we look at Rothera base on timeanddate.com as a cross-reference to dateandtime.info, November 27, 2024, and all dates in November preceding its alleged 24-hour sun, it has the sunrise at 2:04 a.m., which for starters should not be a half hour later in inaccuracy than dateandtime.info's 1:34 a.m. sunrise. But we have the same problem. Rothera is west of Vernadsky, not east. So the sun cannot rise in the west at Rothera 45 minutes before Vernadsky's to its east, or an hour and 17 minutes before, depending on whose data you choose to believe. And yet, they get their solar noontime at 1:20 in the afternoon, the exact same as date and time for Rothera, and 16 minutes after Vernadsky in the east. The sun does not come up in the west first and then double back in the afternoon to be closest to the base in the east first, as it should. Nor does a 16-minute solar noon gap turn into a 45-minute to hour and 15-minute sunrise time difference, as I'll show you why. And the same happens again in January on the 14th, the date both sites at least finally agree Rothera allegedly leaves its alleged 24-hour sun period. Timeanddate.com alleges a 2:23 a.m. sunrise for Rothera, now only late by 13 minutes from dateandtime.info's 2:10 a.m. sunrise, when it was 30 minutes late after November 27th, but again, Rothera is west of Vernadsky, so the sun cannot rise at Rothera at 2:23 a.m. and then 52 minutes later at Vernadsky in the east. Impossible. Once again, timeanddate.com lists solar noon for Rothera at 1:41 in the afternoon, identical with dateandtime.info, 15 minutes later than Vernadsky to the east, as it should, and again, the sun does not come up in the west first and then double back in the afternoon to be closest to the base in the east, as it should. Remember, they're both at sea level on the water, so the tards claiming Rothera is magically getting a sunrise an hour and 15 minutes first in the west is because it's sitting atop some Mount Everest altitude, allegedly, while Vernadsky is down in some mountainous valley, and that's ridiculously wrong. No, Steve, the globe Earth's alleged 23-degree winter tilt towards the sun actually makes Rothera closer to the sun in the morning, getting its sunrise 50 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes earlier. Yeah? Then why does it magically flip back every day and make Vernadsky closer to the sun again at solar noon? you can't have your cake and eat it too. Nowhere else on Earth at any time of year does this alleged changing tilt angle make the sun rise in the west before the east. Nowhere. And even the ridiculous globe model is only claiming a 23-degree tilt towards the sun in November through January, not the 70 to 90 degrees tilt needed for the sun to even rise at Rothera to the southwest in the morning before Vernadsky. Again, from the film, if the sun is the source of the sunlight that we call sunrise and daytime, and the alleged rotation of the globe from west to east is what's causing both the speed of that sunlight to move across the earth and the visual light in the sky we call the sun to move across the earth from our perspective, then both have to move at the exact same speed of that alleged rotation, since the alleged rotation determines the speed of both, which is the same. The light in the sky from our perspective, called solar noon, cannot take 16 minutes to get east to west from Vernadsky to Rothera due to alleged rotational speed of the Earth, and yet magically have its light rise at Rothera first in the west, let alone an hour and 15 minutes beforehand. It is a fact that in the months of November through January, the sun is traversing east to west across the Tropic of Capricorn every day, just inside or above the tropic for November, right on the tropic for December, and just inside again for January. Never any further south in latitude. That is why all of those places and countries on that Tropic of Capricorn are having their summer and hottest and longest days of the year. So that sun's light has to reach and rise in the morning at Vernadsky first, since it is allegedly both north and east of Rothera, and only 16 minutes and a minute or two for latitude adjustment before Rothera, just like their alleged solar noon times, not an hour and 15 minutes after Rothera in the morning. That is impossible. While there's no way to even possibly rectify that, the closest you could even come is if the sun started moving along this path instead of the Tropic of Capricorn, meaning the Earth would have to flip to 70 to 90 degrees, and Australia, New Zealand, and the southern tip of Africa would now be at the North Pole, frozen in the dead of winter, instead of having their hot summer months. By the way, some people have rightly suggested that bases' altitude differences might be a factor for these wildly different alleged periods of 24-hour sun days, as well as the wildly off day lengths for these bases in the same latitude. Remember, what happens in latitude stays in latitude. So bases on the exact same alleged latitude ring or very close to each other in latitude must have the exact same or nearly exact same length of alleged 24-hour sun days in a row, starting and stopping on the exact same dates as each other. And even though their sunrise, sunset, and solar noon times must vary from each other, since they aren't right next to each other, their day lengths on the dates they at least agree there is no more alleged 24-hour sun must be exactly or nearly exactly the same as each other. It cannot be any other way on the globe. And as we see, Rothera on the far left shares identical latitude to Mawson Base and nearly identical latitude to Molodesnaya, Casey Base, and Mirny Base. And as you can see, there is barely zero altitude difference between them other than 100 measly feet, as they are all on the coast and at sea level together. See for yourself, pun intended. Rothera, Mawson, Molodesnaya, Casey, and Mirny up on a 100-foot ice shelf, give or take. So sea level is sea level, aka zero level elevation, aka there's no friggin' altitude difference between them. And since there's also 0 to only 36 miles maximum latitude difference between them all, and what happens in latitude must exactly match everywhere else on that same latitude, there's no friggin' way their alleged dates of 24-hour sun could start November 28th or 29th or 30th at 1. Nobody can even agree. Then November 28th or maybe 30th, but not the 29th at another base with identical latitude. Then November 29th at a base even farther north latitude that can't possibly start a day before two bases further south latitude on November 30th. And then the next one start 5 days later on December 5th, and the next one December 7th, or is it 10th, 12 days later than Rothera on the same latitude? And when does this alleged 24-hour sun period end for 5 identical or nearly identical latitude bases? January 3rd, 5th, 7th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th? That's a 3-day discrepancy for 2 identical latitude bases, Rothera and Mawson, and an 11-day difference total for bases less than 30 miles latitude difference from those two, all on sea level. And again, their day lengths cannot be off from each other by an hour and a half or 2 hours in worst cases, or even 10 to 15 minutes for Rothera and Mawson on identical latitude and sea level. What happens to one base in latitude must exactly happen to other bases on the same latitude circle. Day lengths, start and stop days of alleged 24-hour sun, all of it. Not this. But here's where this gets really interesting. Let's look at these bases on the Gleason flat Earth map, as there are a lot of people parroting the same orchestrated narrative that the final experiment disproves the Gleason map. I beg to differ. Just to show you how to read this map, the red circle is the equator, and you can see the south latitude rings go out in 15-degree increments, with roughly 7.5 degrees marking each midway between 15, 30, 45, 60, 75, halfway between that being roughly 67 to 67.5 degrees south latitude, where the coast of the ice wall mostly is in this part. That number might look familiar to you. Then here in yellow is the Greenwich Meridian line, so east longitudes start here on the right at 0 and go up and around the top to the left opposite. And west longitudes also start here on the right at the same spot and go down and around the bottom to the left and end the same. And you can read them here on the edge. They're also mapped in 15-degree increments, so 0 is here, 15 degrees east is upward, etc., 15 west is downward, and around they each go. The time zones are also there, GMT or Greenwich Mean Time plus 1 hour, etc. east and up and around, or GMT minus 1 hour, etc. west or down and around. British-owned Rothera base claims to be at 67.33 south latitude and 68.07 west longitude, so down on the map. Remember, that blue ring is 60 south, that black ring is 75 south, there's 60 west, so they are half longitude marker further between that and 75, right where they are supposed to and claim to be, on the inside of that little island jetting out. So, the Gleason AE map is inaccurate? And here's the first major red flag. Here they are in UTC minus 4 hours time zone, yet websites claim them to be in UTC minus 3, because that fits better with what I call UBT, Universal Bullshit Time, because all of these bases in red are in UTC minus 3, and so Rothera has to be as well on the globe model, since time zones fan out like this on a globe, because on the flat earth map, those bases in red are here in UTC minus 3. More interesting is that British-owned Rothera, or is that Rothschild era, was a rehab of their previously owned Adelaide station, which they built in 1961. And up until 5 years later in 1966, they still controlled the British colony of Guyana for resource exploitation, which just happens to be right there above Rothera and nowhere near Great Britain. Rothera's identical latitude twin, Australia's Mawson base, we are told is over here across the alleged Antarctic continent on the coast. It is said to be at 67.36 south and this time 62.53 east longitude and in UTC plus 5 time zone. Sure enough, there it is. Not in the water or miles in on the ice wall, but right there on the coast where it should be. Remember, that's 60, that's 75, 67.5 is right in the middle, and just happens to be pretty close to Australia. Whose other base on the list, Casey Station, just happens to be even closer, right next to it as well, said to be at 66.16 south latitude and 110.31 east longitude in the UTC plus 8 time zone. But of course, 66.16 south latitude is about 30 miles more north or out into the ocean than Mawson's 67.33 south, unless the ice wall happened to just jet out further exactly there for some reason, which it does. 60, 75, 67.5, and 66.16, right where they tell us it should be. Not bad for an allegedly debunked AE map. Even nailed the plus 8 UTC time zone again. Of course, just like Australia's Casey base, Russia's Mirny base would also have to be on some weird peninsula sticking off the ice wall, because at only 66.33 south latitude, it too should be about 30 miles short or north into the ocean from the normal ice wall coast at 67.3 to 67.5 south latitude, where Rothera and Mawson sit. We're told Mirny is at UTC plus 7 time zone at 66.33 south latitude and 93.0 east longitude. And would you look at that? What are the bleeping odds that Gleason nailed it again? And also pretty convenient to get to from Russia, as is Russia's other base, Molodezhnaya Station, which we're told is here. And since, like Rothera and Mawson, Molodezhnaya is on that ice wall coastal sweet spot zone of 67.33 to 67.5 south latitude, itself at 67.39 south latitude and 45.5 east longitude, we'd expect not to see any obtrusion jetting out. Nailed it again. Even when we look at things like New Zealand's Scott base and America's McMurdo station, literally right next to each other, we're told they're on this little bump jetting out of this inlet or bay. Suspiciously, Google Earth's satelloons have great details here, but then all of this is worse graphics than the first Atari games. Why don't they have details for that? We are told they are at 77.50.5 south latitude and 166.4 and 166.45 east longitude in time zone UTC plus 13, or here. But on the Gleason map, there is no plus 13 time zone, or at least didn't used to be. They are closer to the middle of plus 11 and plus 12. But once again, the Gleason AE map has nailed it. Remember, that's 60 south latitude, that's 75 south, and there they are at exactly 77.50.5 south latitude and 166 east longitude, right next to 165, right on a little peninsula with a giant bay inlet there, just like this bullshit. And just like all of the others, New Zealand's Scott base is conveniently located right next to New Zealand, and America's McMurdo base is a straight shot from Hawaii. What a coincidence. If that joke of a final experiment claims it debunks the Gleason AE flat Earth map, then tell me, why is it that all of these bases perfectly fit on the flat Earth map in the exact locations and most perfect places for convenience. We notice immediately on the globe model that the alleged vertical longitude lines in yellow get closer together in distance from each other as they get further south towards the alleged Antarctic continent, while on the Gleason map in blue, they get wider apart from each other in distance as they get out towards the ice wall. Could this be another smoking gun and the reason why the sunrise and sunset times examined in Part 1 were so wildly and impossibly off from each other, taking way too long for the sun to travel between bases allegedly so close to each other in longitude on the Google Earth software, built hodgepodge around the globe model latitude distances? Because these bases really are much farther apart from each other than they claim along the ice wall's wider latitude distances, so it really does take the sun an hour to get between them as it laps around or just inside the Tropic of Capricorn. Now we can map the rest of the bases on the Gleason map and double check that, as the sun takes 24 hours to make the lap each day, so we can divide that by the 24 1-hour sun zones on the Gleason map and see if these bases make more sense after we plot out their locations there. Even better, we can then take all of these bases claiming they are having 4 to 12 days more of alleged 24-hour sun than a base just 60 miles north of it in latitude and go equidistant the other way in the summer when the sun is traveling on or just south of the Tropic of Cancer and see if those places are having 4 to 12 days more of their provable 24-hour summer sun, like Lapland, than a place just 60 miles south of it in latitude, as it must on the globe model. Stay tuned for Part 3.